Michael does not need a throne room speech to move the world. The moment his dream takes shape, the celestial palace becomes a weapon. The castle guard begins to fracture, and the first skirmish starts before anyone on the ground can fully understand the war. AI Anime and Manga presents. Before we enter the battlefield, please like, comment, and subscribe if you want more Slime Light Novel episodes. YouTube members get upcoming episodes early, and that support helps cover the AI narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and rendering that keep this series moving. Now Michael enters the war. Benimaru feels the first pressure at the front, and every side learns how quickly one angel lord can bend the whole battlefield. Michael understood that it was a dream. Not a difficult dream or a distant dream, but one impossible to realize. Michael, Lord of Justice, was still only a skill that worked over certain phenomena. That alone could never resurrect Veldanava, the Star King Dragon. Even so, Michael could not stop hoping for it. To him, a world without Veldanava had no value at all. For a few silent moments, that truth sat in his mind. Then Michael opened his eyes and shook his head lightly, trying to rid himself of any lingering sentimentality. What surprised him most was the first emotion that revealed itself there. He had thought he was not as naive as Ludora. He was wrong. That was what the matter came down to. Trust no one, treat everyone as a pawn. If Michael had done that from the beginning, he could have prevented Obela's betrayal. But he had believed in Feldway and trusted Feldway as a friend. Because of that, he had expected his associates to remain faithful as well. That had been a mistake. The moment Obela abandoned Azrael, Lord of Salvation, the ultimate skill Michael had tied to himself, and fled, he realized he had failed. Obela had forsaken him. Using her rights as Azrael's administrator, she had been willing to erase her own skill in order to escape his rule. To compensate, Michael had gone through Feldway and invoked ultimate dominion on the angelic skill users under him, hoping to strengthen his control. That had solved one problem. The mystics were no longer a concern. The insectors could still betray him, but their interests were aligned with his for now. Once the battlefield was prepared, the rest would take care of itself. That battlefield was the land Michael and the insectors had made a pact over. He had promised Seranus that he would be allowed to take possession of this designated area once it was sufficiently cut off from Michael's own side. If anyone lived there, the insectors would be obliged to wipe them out. In other words, Michael meant to send Seranus into what he expected to become the fiercest battle. He would keep an eye on that location, but several problems still needed addressing. First was Obela. The mystics had sworn loyalty to Feldway, so morale did not trouble Michael. Considering their threat level, he could have delayed dealing with them. But he had a feeling that leaving Obela alone was a bad idea. Obela's role had been to watch over Evil Age, the world destroyer dragon. By now, that role had lost much of its importance. Michael did not care what happened to other worlds, and Evil Age's appearance in a key world had already been folded into his strategy. If Obela merely abandoned her post, that made no difference to him. If she tried to cooperate with enemies like the Demon Lords Rimuru and Guy, that was different. To remove that concern, taking the first move promised the surest result. So who should he send? That question weighed on him, and so did another one. Should he proceed to the next target as planned? If he needed to dispatch Obela, did the overall plan require revision? It was not a trivial question. Obela's army formed an entire wing of Michael's force. Losing that strength because of his own mistake made him uncomfortable, another new experience. As a Manus, emotions were difficult for him to process, but lately they had disturbed his thoughts like noise laid over music. Then it occurred to him that perhaps he should enjoy the sensation. If this was what emotions were, perhaps he was lucky. There might be only one perfect answer, but there were countless ways to reach it. The shortest path might not always be the right one. Enjoying the process, not only the destination, seemed acceptable. Impatience narrowed vision. Anger dulled thought. Regret served no purpose if it did not prevent future failure. And so Michael arrived at one possible solution. Michael said aloud, "Yes, I know. I should take down these rebels myself." If he made an error, he should compensate for it on the same day. Instead of imposing his failure on others, he would atone for it himself. That would give him a calmer outlook on his next problem, without opening another wound. Reaching that decision lifted Michael's mood at once. That too was a first-time experience. It made him think that perhaps emotions were not such bad things after all. In the other world, there was no gravity. There was no earth and no heaven, only an empty space that resembled outer space. The only objects there were masses of condensed magicules, strong as magisteel and powerful enough to generate their own gravity. The mystics, once angels, used those asteroid-like objects as bases so they could live as they had in their key world and remember life under gravity. Obela's base was one of them. It was comparable to an asteroid, the stronghold for anti-Ivy League operations, and one of the most important parts of the mystics' living space. That was where Michael went. When he completed spatial transport from the Celestial Palace, he found that the base was already an empty shell. But he sensed a large army nearby. Michael wondered if Obela was there and turned his gaze. Obela must have sensed his presence as well, because she immediately responded and took up a return fire stance. In one fluid movement, her army formed a complete formation across the empty space, bare hostility aimed at Michael. This was not a formation that could exist on a planetary surface. With no ground and no sky, Obela's troops could surround a small number of enemies from every direction. It was a full-space tactic meant to encircle and annihilate. It had worked well against cryptids who fought as individuals and almost never formed groups. Obela's experience against them was extensive, and she knew how to employ this strategy. The soldiers and officers under her were competent enough to carry it out. Michael could only think that it was a waste. If he had the choice, he would have preferred to make use of this force. They were battle-tested warriors who had kept the cryptids contained for a long time. Their merit was undeniable. Losing them here was regretful. But there was no room left for negotiation. Even with Obela and her army directly in front of him, Michael did not doubt his decision to eliminate the traitors and make up for his error. Obela opened with, "You were faster than I thought you'd be." Michael replied, "Your actions are meaningful to me. They've made me aware of my blunder, but you will soon know that I will never forgive you." Obela did not ask for mercy. She told him she had never planned to beg forgiveness, and whether this was his own will or the will of the Michael thrall over him, she had no obligation to follow someone as shady as him. Both sides had confirmed their intentions. The battle began at once. Obela moved first. Hundreds of thousands of troops followed her will, filling that world with light. Her forces occupied the space in a three-dimensional half-sphere. Defensive specialists stood at the front, and layers of soldiers behind them took turns launching a constant stream of attacks. The entire dimension seemed to brim with light, all of it focused on Michael from every point of the half-sphere. Obela's army had been trained to fight cryptids, so it retained its function even in an all-out attack. Energy waves came one after another with ruthless efficiency. There was no natural path to avoid them. All of that concentrated fire struck Michael. He did not panic. No matter what kind of attack this was, Castle Guard should have nullified it. But then a problem arose. Michael grunted and realized what he was feeling: pain. Castle Guard, which was supposed to nullify all strikes, had failed to activate. The layered attack from Obela's army seared his body with an unthinkable amount of energy. Little by little, Michael began taking damage. Rather than lose his composure, he considered the cause. No energy was reaching Castle Guard, which meant no one had sworn allegiance to him. The guess was correct. Ludora had possessed natural charisma and a vast following of imperial subjects. Michael had no such foundation. Very few people in the universe even knew he existed, and those few already had their own masters. Those masters were tied to him by common objectives, not by trust or oaths of fealty. Feldway was the only exception, but Feldway was a friend, not a sworn subject. And since Michael, Lord of Justice, one of Michael's own parallel existences, had been transferred to Feldway, they were treated as essentially the same being. Castle Guard could not work on the power of Michael's loyalty to himself. That was meaningless and logically clear. Michael understood then how little he knew about his own skills. When he had confronted Rimuru's team on the airship, he had thought he was protecting Feldway with his own Castle Guard. He was mistaken. Feldway had been drawing on his own abilities. Michael could no longer borrow the loyalty Ludora once enjoyed. That was why Castle Guard no longer worked for him. Its absolute defense carried strict conditions, and the pain Michael felt now let him understand those conditions deeply. Obela was shocked. She had been briefed on Castle Guard, and she knew attacks should be meaningless. Yet Michael was visibly damaged. She did not waste time puzzling over it. Obela ordered her forces to continue the all-out attack, stay synchronized, and deny Michael any rest. The soldiers saw what was happening and kept attacking at full force without hesitation. Obela had expected Michael to pursue her. The moment she banished the angelic skill from herself, she had prepared for the chance that her disloyalty would be discovered and answered. If she had been in Michael's position, she would have done the same. That was why she had staged this all-out assault while secretly continuing the retreat. Her original plan had been to flee into cryptid territory and force Michael to engage them instead. Now that might not be necessary. Michael's energy was several times greater than hers, a formidable force in battle, but his combat experience was not what she first assessed. Victory like this was tempting to imagine, but Obela rejected the optimism immediately. The soldiers at the end of the line would need to serve as bait. Obela was a brilliant, cool-headed commander. She could treat forces as statistics and sacrifice the weakest under her command to ensure the vast majority survived. That was a prerequisite when commanding such an army. She had already chosen who would remain alive. If Michael made no move, she would transport them away when the chance came. His presence let her open Heaven's Gate from inside that other world. With that in mind, Obela had organized a vast escape. She ordered Oma to lead the first corps away from the front and take them to their master, the Demon Lord Milim. Obela herself intended to remain in command until the end. The first corps was her elite force. Oma was an excellent second in command with outstanding combat skills, strengthened further by acquiring the body of a walking dead. Someday, Oma would be an asset to Milim. Obela trusted Oma enough to give that final order. But Oma would not accept it. In that walking dead body, it had regained speech, and now it answered fluently that Obela had to be joking. Only she, as a primordial, could operate the key to the gate. And there was no way Oma could leave the master it was obligated to protect in battle. Oma smiled quietly, and Obela's generals and soldiers shouted in agreement. Their glory was with Obela. Without her, survival meant little. That was their unvarnished truth and their pride. If Obela had access to Michael, King of Justice, then Castle Guard would have given her ultimate protection, powered by an unbroken command and thousands of loyal underlings. But that was only hypothetical now. Obela was troubled. The worst possible outcome was everyone dying there. At the very least, someone had to reach Milim and tell her everything they knew, including the current situation. Feelings no longer mattered. Obela had to choose the approach with the best chance of success. She had nearly made that decision when she sensed something strange. She ordered everyone to spread out at once. Her focus stayed on Michael. He was still under concentrated fire, and she was too disciplined to let a gap open in the battlefield. That was why she noticed it. Michael's energy had stopped decreasing. He was no longer taking damage. Before she could determine why, she sensed him condensing an enormous amount of energy into a single point. Obela gave the order before guessing the nature of the attack. Hundreds of thousands of troops moved in unison. Those closer to the outer edges of the hemisphere moved faster, letting the entire force spread far and wide without tangling itself. But Michael activated his skill as if mocking all their maneuvers. Michael spoke the name, Cardinal Acceleration. The power he had obtained when he captured Belgrin was now completely his own. A great multi-headed crimson dragon overran Obela's army and killed more than 10,000 troops in an instant. It was nightmarish. Even so, it could have been much worse. If Obela had noticed a moment later, everything would have ended at once. Obela was furious at the sight of her troops being murdered. Still, she kept her cool. She analyzed the attack and calculated the gap between herself and Michael. Her conclusion was simple. It was overwhelming. The tens of thousands of light rays her force fired during their scatter maneuver were harmlessly deflected by an icy barrier around Michael. Obela realized it was not only Velgrin's power at work. This had to be Velzard's. A beautiful, pallid layer of ice wrapped itself thinly around Michael's body like diamond. The lack of atmosphere in that world did not matter. Michael's divine aura was enough to generate supernatural phenomena, and the power of Velzard's snow crystal defensive wall was unmistakable. It was an absolute shield, famed for repelling any kind of attack that bounced off it at any wavelength. Spiritual particle attacks could work, but piercing snow crystal required Velzard-level energy. Michael, as he was now, was comparable to Velzard, perhaps stronger. Obela alone could not break that defense. Only a few of her soldiers could use spiritual particle attacks like disintegration. Even if she gathered all her surviving forces for one disintegration, it would not be enough. Obela tried again to entrust the mission to Oma. She told Oma to flee and to tell Lady Malim. Oma refused again. As chief of staff, it had the authority to disobey Obela's orders, and it could think of no better moment to do it. Oma's determination left Obela with only one path. She told Oma to take command of the fight and ordered everyone to stake their lives on it. Obela ordered her army to die. Everyone under her command looked overjoyed. Their lives were for her. That declaration became the signal. Then the merciless assault began anew. All of us were transported into a frigid wasteland, a world of white and silver. It was almost like I had blundered straight into Guy's stronghold. I had tried to use our transport magic circle, but the magic did not activate. Instead, I used spatial transport to go as far as I could see with the monitoring magic Argos. The moment we arrived on the other side, that piercing cold hit us. It was so frigid I thought my heart was going to freeze. And if it was cold enough to shut even me down, then it had to be Velzard. The atmosphere itself seemed to tremble. This was unmistakably a battlefield. The greatest presence came from the spot where Guy and Velzard were facing off. They had created a vast space of death and destruction where no one else could intervene. So I left them alone. It felt like someone had their eyes on me. I ignored that too. I sensed a little wave of anger, something like, "How dare you ignore me," but I was not going to dwell on it. As an outsider, I had no business barging into that fight. I detected a hint of dismay from that direction, but it did not change my conclusion. Jumping into a place you already know is dangerous is not the choice an intelligent person makes. So I looked for somewhere else to poke my nose. The next nearby sign I picked up was Diablo. It looked like Diablo was fighting Zerario, but again I decided to leave that alone. Diablo was there. Leaving the matter to him should be fine. If he could not do anything about it, I probably could not do much better. That was not just me making excuses. Seal began to object inside my mind.
No, I really do not think that...
I cut in with a little laugh. Seal did not get it. The thing with Diablo, something I had only noticed lately, was that he slacked off whenever I watched him. I did not think he realized it either. It felt like he stopped putting in full effort because he was eager to see what I would do instead.
Yes, that does make sense to me.
Wow. It had been a while since I beat Seal in a debate. Feeling a little emboldened, I gave everyone orders. I told them we would leave the outside alone and head for Leon. There were several battles happening at once, so everyone should join in wherever they saw fit. Benimaru, Soe, Ranga, and Kumara nodded. They were not exactly precision orders, but this was an emergency. If we all moved at once, that was probably our best bet. There was also another pair, or maybe another something, fighting outside. I sensed the remains of heavy magic close to the surface, but my instincts told me to leave it alone. I had no good reason for that choice, but I trusted the voice in my head. This was not the time to get distracted. We needed quick action. With no objections, we made for the castle. Visibility was awful. I had Universal Detect turned up to maximum, but I could not even get a sense of distance. The reason was simple. Velzard's blizzard was contaminated with magicules, enough to neutralize my cancel natural elements skill. I judge distances by how magicules in the atmosphere reflect off matter, so when magicules are swarming every which way, everything gets ambiguous. All we could do was move toward the place where the magicules were being thrown around the most. That turned out to be the right call. Soon we reached Leon's castle. Inside was much better. Getting my full vision back was a relief. Now it was time to find the fight. I sensed Leon's presence and told the others that Benimaru and I would head there while they covered the rest of the battlefield. Ranga, Kumara, and Soe answered in quick succession and set off. I did not watch them leave. I invoked spatial transport and moved myself and Benimaru. The moment we stepped inside, the aura of the battle seemed to explode in my mind. It chilled me. There was an intense energy there, greater than my current full strength, and I could tell things were rough. The scene after transport was a true race against time. I tried using hastened thought to read the situation hundreds of millions of times faster than normal, but the important parts were already clear. Yuuki was in front, using what looked like the last ounce of his energy. Laplace and Tyr were behind him, protecting a woman I recognized. She was Yuuki's secretary, the body once possessed by the demon lord Kazalim, Kigali. The last time I saw her, she had been under Lieutenant Kondo's control. I did not know what had happened, but it looked like her free will had returned. That was not the immediate problem. The real problem was the huge fireball the enemy had already unleashed. Enhanced by an ultimate skill, its purified heat and destructive power could shatter even spiritual particles into nothing. In other words, it could destroy souls. And it had been launched well before I arrived. I was safe. Azathoth, god of the void, could devour that destructive force and protect me from projectile strikes. Benimaru was naturally covered by Azathoth's influence too, but Yuuki and the others were directly exposed. By the time we arrived, they had already taken the hit. I was not sure what could be done.
No, perhaps if you consumed it with Azathoth, god of the void.
I ordered Seal to do it before it could even finish explaining. Seal moved at once. The result was a huge explosion that tore the castle apart. Yuuki vanished in the light, so did Laplace. The explosion was so wide that it distorted space itself. I suppressed a large part of it with my power, but those two had taken the direct hit. In my mind, I could hear Yuuki saying that I had caused him a lot of trouble, but he had never hated me. I could hear Laplace answering that he felt the same, and that now that I was there, everything would be fine. I think I imagined those voices. Yuuki and Laplace were gone without a trace. And yeah, they had caused me nothing but trouble. But Yuuki was a traveler from my homeland, someone Shizu had entrusted to me. By this point, I could not really hate Laplace either. I had even thought we might be able to build some kind of friendship. Still, both of them were stubborn. There was a non-zero chance they were still alive somewhere.
No need for condolences, thanks. It is obvious from what we saw that any hopes for survival are a pipe dream.
Seal's words brought me back to reality. I thanked it and turned the page. Yuuki and Laplace may have made the ultimate sacrifice, but they were not part of our objective right now. Besides, they were two of the most stubborn bastards I had ever met. For all I knew, there really was a chance. I could get sentimental later. If I got trapped in regret before finishing the job, that would be an insult to them. The time Yuuki and Laplace bought had not been wasted. Their barrier, with Tyra supporting it with everything she had, saved Tyr and Kigali from serious injury. I knew because I had already isolated them in my stomach to observe their condition. Seal was doing all the work, but because of Yuuki and Laplace, Tyr and Kigali were rescued in time. After confirming those two were safe, I looked at the enemy. One was Feldway. The other looked like Footman, but not really. Just from looking at him, I could tell he was a different person. Leon was fighting someone I did not recognize. She looked a lot like Elmesia, but she was definitely someone else. The same kind of powerful presence was there, but the essence was different. I could tell she was on our side. How exactly I would work out later. That woman was fighting evenly with Leon, so I left them alone and focused on the more immediate enemies. I tried to stir them up. I told them I had expected them to go after Leon, and that this was a much lower turnout than I had anticipated. I was not showing it, but failing to save Yuuki and Laplace had angered me. It frustrated me badly, and I had no intention of showing mercy. The man opposite Feldway yelled at me, asking who I was and how I dared interfere with him. Feldway identified him as Jahil, then told him I was the demon lord Rimuru, one of the most important people out there, and that he would be wise to remember me. All right, the one who had taken over Footman's body was named Jahil. He had unleashed that fireball, so he was definitely trouble. It was 2 against 2. I would deal with Feldway while Benimaru handled Jahil. At least that was my thought.
Jahil, you say? I'll take you on.
Oh, Benimaru? He was overjoyed to jump in no matter what I thought about it. No point worrying now. Whatever happened, happened. Feldway scoffed that he had not expected to fight me here, but it certainly saved him trouble. I told him I would say the same thing and drew my sword. If I was in this, I was going all the way. Michael had Castle Guard, which made him hard to overcome, but luckily he was not here. This was an opportunity, and I wanted to get rid of Feldway fast. Once I make up my mind, I do not hesitate. Long, dragged-out battles do not benefit me. At times like this, you decide things with one killer blow. And I had prepared for situations like this. I had special skills, finishers, basically. The kind heroes in shonen manga have had for years. So I used it. I shouted the name, Imaginary Blade. The strongest sword technique for multiple targets was probably Melt Slash, which could cut through even spiritual particles. The most skillful sword strike against a single target was Crestwater 100 Flower Bloom. Benimaru's showstopper, Crestwater Dark Flame 100 Flower Bloom, combined the forms of the best sword techniques and added ultimate skill power. It went beyond the point of crushing spiritual particles, making it comparable to Melt Slash. In expertise and might, it was clearly among the best. And thinking about it, I could not let Benimaru outdo me, so I asked Seal to devise a finisher suited to my gifts. I gave feedback too. I wanted something that took Void Collapse, a skill I still did not fully understand even after multiple explanations, and adapted it to boost my sword. That was how Imaginary Blade was born. It did not cut spiritual particles. It ate them. That was what made it special. It consumed spiritual particles into complex space, so there was no blocking it. The only way to resist was to dodge entirely. If someone caught it with a sword, the fight should end right there. My philosophy is that a finisher is not a finisher unless it ends the fight. Among my closer friends, nothing works twice. Show them a skill and they counter it. I could not reveal my real finishers until it truly mattered. Sure, something like parallel existences could counteract it, the way Velgrind liked to, but in a battle between high-ranked spiritual life forms, energy management decides everything. Even if my best move failed to finish, Imaginary Blade was still dangerous. I revealed that finisher immediately, so strong was my desire to finish Feldway off. And yet, with a sound like the air groaning under pressure, my sword stopped. I could tell Seal was surprised. I was pretty damn shocked, too.
I never thought the jinx you feared would be proven like this, Master.
The jinx? I asked.
Yes. It is a common trope in shonen manga that if you use a finisher as your first move, it will always be blocked.
I almost laughed out loud. Seal had picked the worst possible time to be funny. Yes, I had said that. I knew I had. But come on, did anyone expect it to happen like this? For a moment, both of us fell silent. Then I forced myself to move on. Stuff happens. The joke of how easily my blade had been stopped had thrown me a little, that was all. I put my head back into gear and focused on Feldway. Seal had already begun investigating why the attack had been blocked. Until I got those results, attacking would be useless. But I still had to pretend I was not fazed at all, so I decided to talk to Feldway, bluffing all the way. I told him, "Wow, nice job blocking that." Then I slashed at him while pretending I was not disturbed. I thought he would ignore me, but he did not. Feldway told me that since I had gained Noir's good graces, he had wondered how powerful I was. But to him, I did not seem like any threat at all. He knew how to press my buttons. I did not care if he compared me to Diablo, but he was giving no respect to the great new finisher I had just unveiled. No. That was too unnatural. Anyone else would have felt threatened. The only person I could imagine reacting like that was Michael, protected by Castle Guard. Except my attack had not worked one bit. I was not even sure Abyss Annihilation, the attack I had seen Carrera use in the Labyrinth, would work. Feldway also seemed to be fighting with a God-class sword. If Imaginary Blade failed, some kind of divine force had to be in play. Melt Slash was a lower-level option, so it probably would not do any better. I considered just cutting him up in normal sword fight style, but that was not easy either. Feldway was strong in the ordinary sense too. I could feel that just crossing swords with him, looking only at swordsmanship, he was as good as me, maybe better. He could probably give Benimaru a close match. I was a pseudo-true dragon now, with greatly enhanced physical abilities. My movement had improved several times over, not as a metaphor. Training had made me a better swordsman too, but nothing worked on Feldway. I was holding up thanks to a few cheats, and in an emergency I could ask Seal to take over. But in a fair fight, I was beginning to feel like I had no chance. That suggested magic, since he could not deflect that with a sword, but large-scale magic would cause terrible damage to Leon's kingdom. Any spell had to be sized for one person. Abyss Annihilation was powerful enough to affect the future of the planet, so it was off the table. Disintegration barely compared, and single-target nuclear magic like nuclear cannon could not match disintegration anyway. I could enhance strikes with my ultimate skills, but if my opponent had an ultimate skill, he could handle that. I really was not sure what I had against him. The one silver lining was that Feldway was taking a wait-and-see approach. If he counterattacked seriously, I would be stretched to the limit. For now, the best path seemed to be talking him up and searching for a breakthrough. So I kept speaking, making sure he did not notice how irritated I was getting. I told him I was a harmless slime, so no wonder he did not see me as a threat. Feldway said that if I was still trying to talk to him, he now understood why Noir served me. I told him I was not exactly glad to hear that. He answered that I was a thorn in his side, and he had no reason to flatter me. If I was starting to resent the situation, that was fine by him. I had expected him to shut me down, but he was oddly willing to converse. That made things even more disappointing. If he refused to talk at all, I could attack without regrets. But I was still looking for an effective approach, so it was not like I could lord anything over him. Now I had another question. Why was Feldway not trying to fight back? That helped me, but at this rate we were going to cycle through the same moves forever. I was using Void Collapse, but that was an absorption-type skill rather than something I released myself, so it was not tiring me out much. The same was true for Feldway. He had taken no damage, and whatever skill shored up his defense let him parry everything without spending too much. I had one more hidden trick. It was a new move developed from Benimaru's and Carrera's 100 Flower Bloom, a super finisher I could not even use fully without Seal's support. That made it feel like a cheat, and I hesitated. But this was not the time to whine about fairness, so I considered using it if the opening appeared. Except I could not picture it working. That was eerie. Seal seemed to agree. For now, job 1 was figuring out Feldway's secret. That meant this fight was mostly going through the motions for the moment. On the other hand, it gave me a chance to calm down and check the overall situation. I was worried about everyone else, so while keeping a close eye on Feldway, I turned my attention to my friends. Benimaru worried me most. His opponent was clearly superior, so I used Universal Detect to watch them without turning my eyes away from Feldway. Jahil carried an ominous crimson spear. I did not know when or where he got it, but I could sense an incredible force from it.
It seems to be called the Demigod's Blood Spear. Earlier, he bragged, "I will run you through with the spear my most beloved demigod gave me."
Oh, okay. Seal had been keeping tabs on Benimaru's fight. I could not let my guard down, but I was not in crisis mode. Worst case, I still had Veldora, so I could come back to life if I died. Maybe I was lacking urgency, but I could not rush things until I had a strategy, so I kept observing. I did not know what kind of thing Jahil was, but it made sense that he had taken over Footman's body. His nimble footwork and spear aptitude were both excellent. With my perception sped up 1,000,000-fold, I could tell he was a master of both. It was hard to believe he was using someone else's body at all. That proved how dangerous Jahil was. Worse, Jahil had more than 3 times Benimaru's existence points, and the demigod's blood spear was estimated at no less than 10 million existence points on its own. What a cheat weapon. Outside Ramirez's labyrinth, I could not get exact numbers, but between weapon and wielder, Jahil was over 4 times Benimaru's rating. Benimaru was the more skilled fighter, and that was the only reason this was still a match. Without Shimmering Haze, he would have been beaten long ago. That was how much trouble Jahil was. If all of that was true, I wanted to help, but I did not have the freedom right now. I had no choice but to trust Benimaru to keep holding on. As for the other group, they were also in a stalemate. The mysterious Elmesia lookalike fighting Leon seemed as strong as an awakened demon lord, maybe stronger. She appeared to possess an ultimate skill, and that let her keep up with everything Leon did.
She and Leon have very similar fighting styles. One could conjecture that they are teacher and student, perhaps.
I had not noticed because they used different weapons, but once CL mentioned it, the resemblance was obvious. Maybe this woman had been Leon's military instructor. Their ultimate skills seemed to be from the same lineage, too. They were reading each other's moves, which was why they had fallen into a stalemate. I did not see that resolving soon. We could not expect outside help from there, but at least reinforcements were not absolutely necessary yet. The woman called over to me, saying that if I had time to observe her, she would not mind a little help. Oh, wow. She was perceptive. She had noticed me staring right at her. I was not exactly free, but I was watching her every move, so it was hard to deny. I decided to be honest and told her I was at an impasse too, but I could not help peeking. She asked what kind of person could be that preoccupied and still stare at someone else. Then she added that Elle had told her I had no common sense, but I really needed to quit doing that. She was absolutely right. I did not think she had seen through me, but getting distracted like that during battle was not smooth. I told her I would like to take her comments back to my home office and give them the consideration they deserved. She did not sound convinced. She said it did not sound like I wanted to do anything at all, then asked if I thought I could win. Boy, she was sharp. I was trying to make a joke and she saw through me. Yikes, I needed to get serious. Feldway was staring at me with a crazy look on his face. I told her that for now it was not looking good. I did not see any gap to exploit. Feldway snickered and joined our little back and forth. He asked if I was turning away from him in battle and casually bantering now. Very impressive, he said, and yet I claimed he showed me no gaps. Ridiculous. Where did I get off? I told him to shut up. I had given him my top finisher and he blocked it like it was nothing. That was why things were like this. I would not be going through all this trouble if he just lay down and got his ass beat. Feldway told me not to make him laugh. Their plans would have been realized much earlier if I had not interfered, and my servant Noir had crushed several of their other plans as well. I had riled him up too much. He was losing his temper. I insisted that I had nothing to do with whatever Diablo did. Feldway told me that I did, because I was Diablo's master. I said that I had not even known Diablo that long. I was not taking responsibility for something that had nothing to do with me. I was not the one to blame there. That was my story and I was sticking to it. I added that Diablo was just that brazen. The woman agreed with me. Then she said, by the way, she was a little awed at how relaxed I could act in this situation. Something told me that was not a compliment. I wanted to ask why she was not concentrating on Leon, but that would only shake the hornet's nest. So I asked who she was. She answered that she was Elle's mom, and told me to call her Sylvia. That was a surprisingly casual self-introduction. I knew elves had long lifespans, so maybe this was reasonable. But she looked practically like Elmesia's identical twin and was also her mom. I still had enough common sense from my old life to find that weird. I stole another peek. Sylvia was fighting at close range, close enough that I would not expect anyone to relax and chat. It was almost like everything had been choreographed to the last millimeter. Leon and Sylvia dodged each other's strikes by a hair's breadth and leaped straight into counterattacks. If she had room to banter under those conditions, she had a lot of nerve. I asked if she could handle Leon since she was his teacher. Sylvia said I could tell, and she would not deny it, but she was not sure handling him was on the table. To be honest, she had not expected Leon to be this good. She presented it like a joke, but I thought she meant every word. They had been walking a tightrope before we arrived. I would not blame her if she lost focus soon. The equilibrium we had now would collapse the moment things leaned too far in one direction. None of us could be too casual about our chances. I thought about Leon. I had certain measures I could take against him, but should I really break them out? I preferred to wait until they would be most effective, and right now did not seem like the moment. The situation was bad, but we were still maintaining equilibrium. If I pushed too hard, I might expose myself to danger. I resolved to keep an eye on Leon. Then Benimaru lodged a complaint at me.
Sir Rimuru, I can clearly tell you're quite relaxed right now, but I'm in deep over here.
It was rare to hear Benimaru whine like that. I could not blame him. A fourfold difference was no joke. I asked, deep?
Like, real deep.
Yeah. Jahil's specialty seemed to be flame attacks, which fortunately gave Benimaru an advantage. He would have lost long ago otherwise. Really, it was kind of a miracle. So now what? This balance could break at any moment and decide the battle right then and there. I was not exactly a spectator either. I had several cards up my sleeve, but I was wavering over when to use them. Leon was one thing, but Feldway and Jahil did not seem too challenged either. We were at a definite disadvantage. Should we wait for someone else to beat their opponent and come running in? Should I use demon summoning one of my aces and call Testarossa or someone over? But our foes could do the same thing. Then it would turn into a quagmire. It honestly seemed like the best choice was to wait a little longer and see how things worked out. I told Benimaru to hold out just a bit longer.
Hey, I really can't buy us that much time.
I had not heard Benimaru sound that pathetic in quite a long while. So I began discussing with CL whether there was any way to break out of this situation.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.